Drawing the human form can be highly complex, but there's a variety of methods you could use to simplify the task greatly. Now, I've taken a little bit of a sabbatical from art as a whole this past year, and I've noticed since I wasn't finding the time to draw, or more specifically, finding the time to intentionally practice, there was a slow and gradual decline in my figures. However, after fine-tuning my forms and doing some studies, I think I've come up with a fairly robust figure drawing method that I'd like to share with you guys today. Now, originally what I'd do is I'd start with the gesture line, place an oval for the rib cage, and then a box for the pelvis. Using my intuition, I could kind of piece it together and guess proportions, but this video is all about actually getting something a little bit more concrete, right? Now, a lot of this is going to be based off Bridgman's Complete Guide to Drawing Life, which, if you haven't read or at least studied from, is a fairly good book, and I'd recommend you guys try it out after this. So, what's changed? To begin, we're going to block in where our figure will lie in the drawing. It's important to do this, especially for any time you're drawing a scene included with the figure, and you don't want them just floating around in space. You want them to actually be grounded. Now, immediately moving on after that, we're going to draw in the skull. Now, the actual proportions are roughly 7.5 heads tall for a figure. However, there is some room to wiggle with this. Michelangelo, for example, he used 8 heads. Keep in mind, this is only true for characters in a neutral perspective, right? Characters in dynamic poses or in a really warped perspective, you're going to have to adjust. The reason why I prefer the 8 heads method as opposed to 7.5 is because I find it very consistent. For starters, you could just divide the figure in half, and then you're going to place your pelvis directly on top of that midway mark. From there, you'll just follow some basic proportion. The chin to the clavicle, right, your neck, is going to be 0.5 heads. And then after that, we're going to go ahead and draw our chest. That's going to be roughly 1 full head. And while we're here, let's go ahead and draw the shoulders and hip and place them at an angle. This will really breathe some life into your drawing, and as long as you're doing it not too aggressively, it shouldn't affect the proportions too much. After this, we're going to go ahead and draw the knees, which conveniently for us is going to be right above the bottom quarter of our drawing. I like creating this zigzag shape for the skeleton because I find it's going to assist us later on when we're drawing the calves in further detail and detailing out the thighs. While this is not strictly necessary, while we're here, we're just going to create a marker midway through the thigh, which is where our hands will rest if our arms are straight down. Now that we have these basic guidelines out, we can start adding some mass to our figure, right? It's important for your actual finished drawings or anything you're doing professionally to pull up some reference. We're going to draw an oval for the rib cage and draw this boxy shape for the pelvis. I'll draw the knees in pretty boxy, and towards the upper part of the thigh, we're going to add some mass, which is going to round out the form a little bit. As mentioned before, the chest is going to be roughly 1 head's length tall, and while we're here, we might as well go ahead and draw in the shoulders. Now, it's perfectly reasonable from this point to start drawing our arms, but I find it a little bit more useful to start detailing out the silhouette of the legs from this point on. What's really important in this stage is connecting the legs properly to the torso, as well as including a sense of gravity in the legs. Now, the way you do this is by changing up the peaks of the silhouette, as well as the shapes you're using, right? So, for instance, our ankles are going to be pretty boxy, whereas our calves are going to be pointy. Again, our knees are going to be boxy as well. And then the tops of our thighs, we're going to round out a little bit. I always found you get enough detail by drawing a cube as well as this triangular shape to get started with shoes. And if you want to learn how to draw feet, this is not the channel for you. Okay? Alright, now there's a fairly robust and simple method to start drawing arms, and the best way to think about this is as interlocking chain links. So the first link is going to be our shoulder, the second will be our bicep, and the third will be this major mass of the forearm. Keep in mind that it's not the entire forearm, it's going to straighten out into more of a cylinder towards the wrist, and then from there you'll add on your hands. Now, hand drawing 101, you want to make sure the back of our hand as well as our palm isn't a complete square, right? You want it to have a rounded shape, or at least come to a point. And then from there, you're going to go ahead and draw your fingers as well as your thumb. Quick heuristic, keep your pointer finger or your pinky separate from the other 3, right? Shape language, you keep them drawn like that. Finally, we're going to move on to the skull. Now, I know you guys have probably heard these proportions a million times, so we're just going to run through it very quickly. Eyes are going to be halfway down the skull, right? And halfway between that, creating our quarter divider, we're going to put our nose on top of that. And then, again, one more halfway divide between our nose and our chin. We're going to put the bottom of the lip on top of that. Our eyes are going to be roughly 1 eye width apart, and that's going to be the same width for our nose. The corners of our mouths are going to be roughly where the pupils would lie if we're looking straight forward, or in the middle of the eye. This is really all the detail you need to get started moving forward with your figure, right? If your character is closed, You just put it on top of this. Don't feel like you need to go into any more detail. However, the areas of exposed flesh, right, like let's say your character is shirtless, you need to put in a little bit more detail. If you want a companion video to this one, subscribe first of all. And if this video gets, we'll say, 13 likes, I'll do it next week, where we'll go into a little bit more depth of the the exposed areas of the body. And while you're here, feel free to check out last week's uploads. Without further ado, I'll see you guys later.